Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the chill-drenched halls of a medieval Icelandic monastery, where the walls are thick, the mornings are merciless, and the breakfast is, well, let's just say it won't make your foodie friends jealous. You trudge barefoot across the cold stone floor of your cell, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and dares you to think twice about getting up. Outside, a heavy mist coils around the stone chapel like a sleepy ghost, and the faint clang of a monastery bell echoes across the frostbitten hills. It's time to rise, not because you want to, but because you're told to. The rules are older than the sagas, and here, in this quiet corner of Iceland, those rules ring louder than any alarm clock. You pull your rough woolen robe tighter, hoping the itch distracts you from the hunger gnawing in your stomach, a familiar companion in this life of devotion. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're re-listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fun to see who else is unwinding around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink slowly as you open the heavy wooden door of your cell, the hinges creaking like a tired yawn. The air bites your skin, but it's used to everything here, really. Used to the silence, the routine, and the way your feet slap gently against the stone floor as you make your way toward the cloister. It's still dark out, of course it is. Iceland doesn't rush the sun, especially in winter. The monastery is quiet, but not dead. Somewhere, a fire is being coaxed to life, and the scent of smoke mingles faintly with the salt air drifting in from the sea. You can almost pretend it smells like bacon. Almost. The bell rings again, closer now, echoing through the cloister, like a call from another world. You know what it means. Prayer, first, food, second, or third, or whenever the abbot decides it's time. That little rumble in your belly. Best keep it to yourself. Hunger is just another test. As you reach the chapel, you pass the other silent, stooped, wrapped in identical robes. No one speaks. That's part of the rule. You all bow slightly, acknowledging each other with weary glances, then slip into place on the cold wooden benches. The chanting begins low, slow, and so monotone it could lull a sparrow to sleep. You try to focus, really you do, but the mental image of a thick slice of cheese on warm bread keeps floating to the front of your thoughts. The cheese probably doesn't exist. The bread, maybe, but not warm. The wind rattles the stained glass softly as you hum along with the psalm. You feel it, the tug of discipline, and the tug of your stomach wrestling in the space behind your ribs. Some monks would call it spiritual purification. You might call it skipping breakfast with extra steps. Historians still argue whether the early monastic emphasis on fasting was more about religious purity, or simply a practical way to stretch out rations in a land where the soil was stingy, and the winters were unforgiving. You try not to yawn sacrilegious during prayer, but it's hard. You didn't sleep much, and that slab of a mattress stuffed with straw and regret didn't help. The bell tolls again, softer this time. Morning prayers are ending. You're allowed to move now. Not speak, heaven forbid, but move. One by one, you and the others rise and file toward the kitchen, which is less a room and more a stone cave with fire in it. There's no rush. There never is. Rushing would imply desire. Desire implies sin. Or, so the rulebook goes. You take your place on the bench and glance sideways at the kitchen door. Behind it, brother is working, always the first to rise, the last to speak, and the one whose porridge determines the mood of the entire monastery. You hear a soft clatter of bowls, a muffled cough, and then the heavy scent of oats being stirred into boiling water, maybe thickened with last week's sheep's milk if you're lucky. The abbot hasn't come yet, which means no food. Not yet. Not until he mutters the blessing that sounds suspiciously like a weather report. The other monks sit like statues, hands folded, eyes low. Your stomach gurgles again, louder this time, and you mentally pray no one heard it. They probably did, but no one looks. That's the thing about monastic life. It's quiet, but not forgiving. You take a deep breath and imagine the breakfast ahead. Oats, maybe coarse bread, possibly a sliver of fish if the gods or the kitchen smile on you. But deep down, you know, it won't be enough. It never is. Still, you wait, and hope, wait and ache, because this is what you chose, or what chose you. And this is only the beginning. The hallway from chapel to kitchen is dim, the kind of dim that feels like it's soaked into the walls. You shuffle forward, the rough wool of your robe brushing against your ankles with every slow step. your bare feet pressed onto stone that's cold enough to remind you you're still alive, though just barely. The smell hits you first, a mingling of damp ash, sour milk, and something that might have been fish once, but has since evolved into an entirely different species. It's oddly comforting, in a depressing, monastic sort of way. This is the scent of routine, of survival. You tighten your robe around your waist, not because it helps the cold, but because it's the only act of control you get this early in the day. The walls around you are thick, made from volcanic stone dragged and stacked by hands now long turned to dust. Historians still argue whether these thick walls were built more for insulation or for defense. But honestly, at this hour, either purpose feels equally valid. You pass under a small arched doorway where a single torch flickers. It doesn't do much for warmth, but the soft sputtering is a kind of reassurance. You followed the others, single file, silent as winter fog. No one talks. You'd get more emotion from a row of sheep, but that's the point, isn't it? Silence, simplicity, detachment. Except your stomach didn't get the memo. It growls again, slightly louder than before. You glance at Brother Stigender in front of you. His ears twitch, but he doesn't react. Either he's pretending not to hear, or he's just given up on judging you. Either way, a small win. You round the corner and enter the refectory, a long, low room with wooden benches and a central hearth. The fire's already burning, low in orange, casting flickering shadows against the soot-blackened walls. You sit on your usual bench near the end, where the cracks in the stone floor let in an occasional puff of sea wind. It smelled like salt, sheep, and penance. Across from you, a line of clay bowls is being set out by the kitchen novice, young Brother Odda, who's always up before the sun and never looks like he minds. You suspect that's either divine peace or sleep deprivation. Probably both. You watch him move, steady and practiced. He ladles out portions of something thick and gray-brown into each bowl. Porridge. Or something pretending to be porridge. The texture is more mortar than meal, but it's warm, and that counts for a lot. There's no honey, no fruit, no cinnamon, just oats, boiled in water or sheep milk. If there was any left after the abbey's 2 reluctant goats were milked. If you're lucky, there's a pinch of salt. If you're unlucky, there's a hair. You'll eat it either way. At the head of the room, the abbot enters, tall and slow, like a glacier wrapped in wool. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. With a raised hand and a muttered blessing that even the angels might sleep through, he gives the signal. You may now eat. Quietly, and without expression, you reach for the wooden spoon beside your bowl, worn smooth by years of repetition. The first bite is hot enough to scald your tongue, which helps distract from the taste. It's bland, earthy, vaguely nutty, and surprisingly filling. Not delicious, but it doesn't need to be. This isn't a feast. This is fuel. A kind of sacred sludge. You chew, slowly, mechanically. You're not allowed to talk, but your eyes wander. Brother Cattell 3 places down is already halfway through his bowl. He always eats fast, like the food might vanish if he doesn't keep up. Brother Estine, on the other hand, eats like a poet, tiny spoonfuls, eyes closed, savoring every miserable mouthful as though it were poetry made edible. You take another bite and wonder what it'd be like to eat something that crunched. Just once. Maybe even tasted sweet. But not here. Sugar is a distant dream, imported from the south, far too expensive for monks in a wind-battered Icelandic outpost. Occasionally, travelers from Europe bring something, maybe almonds, but that's reserved for feast days or noble guests. For the rest of you, it's porridge. Again, always porridge. Occasionally, if the weather's kind or brother is feeling generous, there'll be a small crust of bread on the side. It's dense, dark, and stone-hard, made from rye or barley flour, and baked in a pan that's seen better centuries. The crust is charred, the inside sour. You soak it in your porridge just to make it Still, there's something about the ritual, the quiet company, the steam rising from the bowl, the hush of the early morning that makes the whole experience oddly peaceful. You're not full, not really, but you're not starving either, and that's a victory. Across the hall, you notice a mouse dart under the bench, chasing a crumb that may or may not be older than it is. No one reacts. Mice are common here. Companions. Even you once heard a joke whispered in the storeroom. At least the mice have something to eat. You didn't laugh, but you didn't forget it either. Breakfast ends not with a signal, but with a sense when enough monks have set down their spoons. Others follow. You do the same, your bowl still warm in your hands. No one leaves until the abbot does, and when he finally stands, the rest of you do, too. In silence, again, you file out. The fire crackles behind you, slowly dying back into ash. You walk slower now, the food settling in your belly like a soft stone. It's not luxury, it's not joy, but it's enough. You head toward your next prayer session, the cold air finding its way back into your robe. You pull it tighter again and smile, just a little. Somehow, you're ready for the day. Your feet know the way by now down the side hall, past the low arch where the roof always drips in spring, and toward the smaller chapel where Lord's is held. You move slowly, not out of laziness, but out of routine. Everything here is done with the same unspoken rhythm. Every breath is deliberate, every step is quiet, and every stomach, including yours, is still humming with a half-satisfied ache from the morning meal. The silence remains as heavy as your robe, and in it, your thoughts wander to the food, to the rules, to the strange tension between gratitude and grumbling. See, here in this abbey, you're not supposed to think about food with fondness. Benedictine rules, strict and clear, emphasize fasting as a spiritual tool. Breakfast is permitted, yes, but only in certain seasons, and usually under very specific. Historians still debate just how consistently these rules were applied in Iceland's isolated monks. Some believe the northern monks took a more practical approach, bending fasting schedules to suit the harsh realities of the land. Others argued that the rules were followed more strictly here, precisely because there was so little else to hold on to. Either way, the result is the same. Breakfast is not a joy, not a conversation, not a comfort. It's a necessity. You reach the chapel and kneel again, knees pressing into the cold flagstones, hands clasped, eyes half-lidded from the warmth of recent porridge. The chants begin, again slow, again deep, again droning, in a way that makes you question whether time is still moving. Your mind drifts, dangerous but inevitable. You picture the barley bread, dark and dense, with its slightly bitter crust and occasional hard seed crunch. Not because it was delicious, but because it was real, solid, dependable. Unlike, say, abstract spiritual enlightenment, which remains frustratingly intangible. Your eyes flick open and catch Brother Skmund rubbing his stomach discreetly under his robe. You're not the only one thinking about food. That's a comfort at least. You think back to last spring when Brother Otter whispered just once about how he dreamed of butter. Just butter. Not meat. Not cake. Just soft, salted butter, spread on warm bread and melting slightly at the edges. You remember how the others looked at him, horrified, yet hungry, as if he'd spoken some sacred truth no one else dared admit. Because, let's be honest, hunger is a frequent visitor here. Sometimes, it's quiet, like now, a background murmur. Other times, it roars. In fasting seasons, you go longer without food than your body likes to admit. Lent, Advent, Ember, does you know them all intimately, not by calendar date, but by the exact sensation of lightheadedness they bring. But you never say that out loud. Complaining is you straighten your back slightly and hum along with the next verse, though the words are starting to slip through your fingers like steam. The abbot leads, his voice raspy and low, like rocks rubbing underwater. You wonder if he's hungry too. Probably. But he'd never say so. Once, years ago, you saw him eating alone after just a scrap of fish, some broth, and what might have been a stolen fig. You never told anyone, not out of loyalty, but out of understanding. Everyone breaks sometimes. Even abbots. Especially abbots. You try to there's still a sliver of warmth in your belly from the porridge. It wasn't much, but it's holding you together. And that, here, counts as a blessing. You feel your fingers twitch slightly. It's the only movement you allow yourself. The sun still hasn't risen. The sky outside remains a dull slate color, the kind that makes you wonder whether daylight ever existed. In the summer, it's the opposite light for days on end. Sleep a rare luxury, but now, the long, dark mornings stretch like wool, endless, and then, it's hard to stay awake. You remember last winter, when Brother Snorri passed out during mass, faced first, into the stone floor. Didn't even cry out, just crumpled like old parchment. They said it was exhaustion. Probably fasting, too. He was fine, eventually. Got extra porridge for a week. A luxury. You bite the inside of your cheek gently, reminding yourself to stay present. The chant winds down, and you rise again, knees creaking like old shipwood. You're not old, not yet, but this life ages you in strange ways. Silence continues. You file out again, back through the same hallway. You brush past the walls you could trace in your sleep. They've held generations of monks before you, names carved lightly in doorframes, initials pressed into stone. You wonder what they thought about during prayers. Probably the same thing you do. Maybe that's the secret. 1,000 years of men trying not to think about bread. You reach the cloister again. The open-air square, where the wind likes to bite the hardest. It whips your robe like a living thing, and you wrap your arms around yourself to hold in what little warmth remains. You wish, not for the first time, that you could speak, not to complain, just to ask someone, do you ever think about leaving? But the rules hold your tongue, and the wind answers for you. You move on, because there's always more to do. The sun is beginning to rise now, faint light casting gray streaks across the snow-covered stones. Another day has begun, and your belly is just full enough to pretend you're not still hungry. And tomorrow, there'll be porridge again. You're sure of it, unless brother has other plans, which he often does. You smile faintly. It's not joy, but it's something close. You're back in the refectory before you realize it, pulled there by scent more than memory. The fire's lower now, but it still throws lazy orange flickers across the soot-streaked ceiling. Brother's at the hearth, stirring something in a pot that gurgles like it's complaining. You can almost hear it sigh. Another day, another ladle. He doesn't notice you at first, he rarely does. His focus is total, almost priestly, as he guides the heavy wooden spoon in slow circles. The pot contains a day's second and final batch of porridge oaties, or maybe barley, swollen and soft in sheep's milk or water, depending on the mood of the livestock. The texture is somewhere between paste and punishment, but as your stomach stirs again, it doesn't matter. It's warm. It's thick. It's something. You sit near the fire, legs tucked beneath your robe, watching the steam rise in ghostly curls. The scent is earthy and simple, a little sour, a little nutty, like the memory of something richer. In a strange way, it's comforting, like chewing on survival. Brother finally glances over, gives you a barely perceptible nod, then returns to his stirring. He mutters something, maybe a blessing, maybe a complaint, and tosses in a pinch of sea salt. A luxury. Here, the monastery is close enough to the coast that the salt trade is possible, but just barely. Some weeks, there's none. Others, it tastes like the ocean cried in your bowl. Historians still argue whether salt was rationed intentionally to promote spiritual detachment, or simply because it was expensive and hard to store in damp climates. Either way, its presence now feels like a gift. You glance toward the corner where two wooden barrels sit. One contains dried herbs, nettles, thyme, maybe a sad sprig of something pretending to be mint. The other is for milk, what little you can coax from the monastery's pair of grumpy sheep, who give just enough to avoid being turned into stew. Today's porridge, judging by the thin sheen on the pot's edge, has seen some milk. Not a lot, but enough to make it stick to your ribs in the right way. You wonder if that is why brother is humming. A good milk day can feel like a small miracle. A few other monks filter in, each drawn like you to the scent, the warmth, or the faint hope that this batch might be better than yesterday's. They sit quietly. There's no need. Your stomach speaks plenty. You glance at the wooden bowls stacked neatly on the side table, each one slightly different, worn smooth by years of quiet meals and quiet thoughts. You always pick the one with a small crack along the rim that leaks just enough to keep you from overfilling. A reminder not to be greedy. Not that there's much chance of that here. Brother finally begins ladling out the porridge. Each portion is near identical, measured by the eye and the weight of centuries of repetition. When he hands you yours, his eyes meet yours for a second. There's no smile, but something like kindness passes between you, a flicker of shared knowing. You take your seat and dip your spoon. The porridge is thick, just this side of glue, and still steaming. You blow on it gently, watching ripples form across the surface. First taste, hot, bland, slightly metallic. Then the salt kicks in sharp, unexpected, almost thrilling. You suppress a grin. Not feast day good, but better than average good. You eat slowly, savoring each bite like it might vanish if you move too fast. There's no bread to dano crust left from yesterday, and certainly no fresh loaf. Bread requires fire, flour, time, and most importantly, the abbot's permission. Still, the porridge is enough. Your body relaxes with each bite, as if warming from the inside out. You pause once to let a spoonful cool, and your eyes drift to the ceiling. It's black with years of smoke, and you swear you can make out the shape of a bird in the soot wings stretched, frozen mid-flight. Maybe someone carved it once. Maybe it's just a trick of the eye. Either way, you like it. It gives the room character, gives the silence something to sit beside. A breeze creeps in through a crack in the stone wall behind you, and you pull your robe tighter. The spoon clinks against the bowl, echoing softly in the space. You catch Brother Astine doing the same. Accidental music made from hunger and habit. You finish the last spoonful slowly, dragging it out like it might prolong the warmth in your belly. When the bowl's empty, you don't move. You just sit, breathing in the scent of smoke and oats, letting the moment linger. Somewhere, a sheep bleats. Somewhere, water drips. The monastery breathes around you slow. You think about Brother again, still tending the pot even after everyone's been served. He'll scrape the bottom later. Probably eat the burned bits with silent satisfaction. The kitchen monk always eats last, always eats least. It's a quiet sacrifice, rarely spoken of, but deeply respected. You once saw him accept a lump of old cheese from a traveling merchant and give it away without tasting it. Said it didn't feel right, that the monks were full enough. You remember that? Especially on days like today, when the porridge is good and your belly is warm. You'd feel the peace settle in, heavy and slow. Outside, the wind has softened. The light is creeping in through high windows, casting pale gold lines across the floor. Another day is beginning, and you're ready. Not because you're full, but because you've had just enough. Just enough warmth, just enough salt, just enough of Brother S. quiet kindness in a bowl. And in a place like this, that's everything. The bread comes only sometimes. And today, finally, it comes. You spot it first by the smell of dry, faintly sour aroma drifting through the hallway like a humble miracle. Your eyes flick toward the corner of the refectory where a wooden tray rests, stacked with thick, jagged slices of rye. You wouldn't call it fresh. Exactly. It's hard, dense, and slightly burnt on the edges, but your heart still lifts when you see it. This is the bread of the north. Stone-ground rye or barley, dark as peat, baked slowly overnight beside the kitchen hearth, and often left there too long. That blackened crust you're eyeing. It's the flavor of forgetfulness. Brother S. favorite seasoning. You cross the room quietly and take a slice rough-edged, flat, and heavy in the hand. It feels less like food and more like a weapon. Still, it's bread, and bread means breakfast feels a little more complete today. You break off a corner and bite in, bracing yourself. The crust crunches like gravel, the inside chewy and sour, almost smoky. There's no yeast, of course. Iceland's cold, damp air makes leavening an impossible dream. The monks learned long ago to work without a trelling on dense doughs, natural fermentation, and the sheer force of will to make something vaguely edible. You chew slowly, grinding each bite with the patience of a cow. But there's a strange satisfaction in the effort. This bread is work. It doesn't go quietly into your stomach, it has to be earned. Historians still argue whether these rustic loaves evolved from native baking traditions or were imitated from European models and brutally adapted for survival in the harsh Icelandic climate. Either way, you're glad for it. It's plain, but it's honest. You take another bite and let your teeth do the rest. Around you, the other monks eat in similar silence. No one moans with pleasure. No one smiles. But there's something in the way they hold the bread, reverent and careful, that tells you this is a small joy. A crust like this might survive a winter. It probably already has. You remember one summer brief and blessed when the barley harvest was surprisingly kind. Brother made a version of the bread with herbs mixed in. Crushed angelica, a dash of ground birch bark. It was still dense, but it smelled wild and tasted faintly green. That was a good week. This slice, however, is a return to form. Hard, dark, mildly sour, slightly ashy. You wonder how long it sat by the hearth. Possibly overnight, possibly all week. Some mornings the bread tastes of smoke, others of dust. Today, it tastes of both, but there is also a strange sweetness buried deep in the chew, maybe from the barley's sugars, or maybe just from the hunger in your mouth, imagining things. You chew anyway. It's funny how much effort it takes to eat something so humble. You soak the last corner in the remains of your porridge, old monk's trick, to soften the edge. It doesn't help much, but it keeps your jaw from you. That softening soak is sacred in its own way. Water, porridge, maybe a hint of broth if the kitchen was generous. It turns the bread from a stone into something more like damp wood, but edible wood. You eat it all, because nothing is wasted here. Not even crumbs. Not even the burnt bits. Once, a traveling priest from the south visited the abbey and left half his crust on the bench. You remember how scandalized the kitchen monk was. How quickly the slice vanished into a storage sack for the birds. No bird ever saw it. Not here. Not in winter. You glance across the room and spot brother gnawing at his own slice, like it owes him money. You smile faintly, just for a moment. Never speaks, but his chewing sounds like a battle hymn. Across the table, brother dips his crust into his water bowl, eyes closed like he's communing with the Holy Spirit. Maybe he is. You wouldn't be surprised. This bread, after all, has character. It outlives men. It teaches patience. It breaks teeth and softens hearts. You think of the sayings passed down in the Abba little jokes woven into tradition. If you can swallow the crust, you can survive the storm. The darker the bread, the brighter the soul. 3. Choose per virtue. They're nonsense, of course, but comforting nonsense. You finish your slice with a final bite that echoes faintly in your jaw. You feel full, not in the decadent sense, but in the quiet, grounded way, like you've eaten enough to hold your spine straight through morning prayers, and somehow, that feels like a triumph. You wipe your fingers against your robe, brushing off crumbs that cling like barnacles. Then you place the empty bowl and your spoon gently on the wooden sideboard, where they'll be washed in silence later. You offer a small nod toward the hearth, where the last logs are crumbling into ash. There's something deeply ancient about this moment. This bread. You're not the first monk to eat this way. You won't be the last. The monastery endures, and so does the bread. Burnt, blackened, beloved. As you rise to return to your duties, you catch a last whiff of the crust on your breath, smoky, sour, stubborn, just like the land, just like the monks, just like you. If you're lucky, really, genuinely, monks roulottes. Lucky today might include a little extra on the side. Not fruit, not cheese, and certainly not eggs. No, we're talking about preserved butter. Or fish. Possibly both. Though that's a miracle you've only seen twice, and one of those times turned out to be a mistake. You slide into your usual seat, eyeing the serving tray being carried in with a mixture of suspicion and cautious hope. It's brother again. Of course, his movements as deliberate as the saint carving stone. The tray bears a small wooden dish, roughly the size of your palm, and on it, a pale, slightly waxy lump. Butter, probably churned weeks ago and stored in the cold pantry alongside pickled roots and salted meat. It's stiff, uneven, and carries the smell of sour cream and smoke. You try not to stare, but everyone is staring. There are only 3 dishes, 15 monks. You already know how this works. The abbey rotates these little indulgences on an informal schedule, and today, by some divine twist, your row is up. You're not supposed to celebrate. You're not even supposed to look grateful. But you are. You reach forward as the dish is passed down, and you scrape off your modest portion with the edge of your spoon just enough to spread. The texture is dense, slightly gritty from ash or cold churning, and it starts to melt the moment it touches the crust of leftover bread on your bowl's edge. You take a bite. Salted, rich, shockingly indulgent. Your mouth doesn't know what to do with this level of flavor. The fat clings to your tongue. The salt sparks memories of coastal winds, and you almost choke on the luxury of it all. Butter is rare here. Monks don't raise cows. They have sheep. Sure, but the milk is thin, the yields meager, and churning is labor-intensive. Most of what is made gets stored away for feast days, or for abbots who forget the meaning of humility. That makes today special. Historians still debate how often Icelandic monastic communities had access to dairy, especially butter. Some records suggest it was seasonal. Others claim it was bartered from nearby farms, and a few hint that certain monks kept secret churns hidden behind chapel walls. You'd believe it, a taste like this could make a man hide things. But butter's not the only miracle on today's menu. Just as you finish licking the remnants off your spoon, another tray arrives, this one bearing thin slices of dried fish. Cold, pale, and slightly translucent. It's likely haddock, or cod, hung for weeks in the wind until it became hard enough to survive war, winter, or monks with blunt teeth. You'd pick up a piece and sniff it. The scent is sharp brine, seaweed, maybe a hint of smoke. It cracks when bent. Not exactly inviting, but definitely edible. You dip it briefly in your water. Bowl on. Old trick to soften it, then chew carefully. It's salty, chewy, and carries a flavor that's part Osha, part Attic. But you chew anyway. Slowly, respectfully. This is protein. This is rare. This is almost happiness. The monks around you do the same. No one speaks, of course, but you feel the mood shift just slightly. The air in the refectory warms. eyebrows rise a fraction. Chewing becomes less grim. This is a good breakfast by Abbey standards, which, admittedly, are subterranean. You think about the fish where it came from. Probably brought in from the coast, traded with a passing merchant, or caught by brother, who occasionally disappears with a net and reappears with that quiet, smug expression monks aren't supposed to have. You respect him for it. The fish may be dry, tough, and faintly leathery, but it's real food, and after days of oat porridge, real is everything. You chew and chew and chew, and still the fish resists. You think it might be chewing back, but finally it yields, and you would swallow triumphantly, as if having completed some minor penance. You remember reading in the Abbey's battered annals that dried fish once saved the entire monastery during a particularly brutal winter. 7 weeks of blizzards, no grain, and barely a whisper of livestock. The monks ate nothing but dried fish and broth until spring. Some went half mad from the monotony. Others, according to legend, developed a spiritual connection to the sea so deep they could predict storms in their dreams. You suspect exaggeration. But then again, who are you to argue with the sea? The butter's nearly gone now. The fish plate empty. A few monks discreetly lick their spoons, then pretend they weren't just doing that. You feel a faint warmth in your chest, not just from the fat and salt, but from the memory this morning will leave. It won't happen again soon. Not here. The abbot rises from his seat slowly, his bowl spotless, his expression unreadable. He nods once. Breakfast is done. You stand, placing your bowl carefully on the collection table. No one rushes. The mood has shifted into something quiet as satisfied, but solemn. The good mornings are always like this. You walk back out into the corridor, heart lighter, belly warm, and jaw slightly sore from the fish fight. You think of the butter again, that small, melting bite, that moment when time slowed, and everything else, the stone walls, the chanting, the silence faded just a little. Food is memory here, and today, you've made one worth keeping. There are days when the land gives you more than fish and oats just barely, just briefly, and when it does, your breakfast transforms in the quietest, gentlest way. Not into a feast, not into something lavish, but into something surprising. This morning, as you round the cloister wall after chores, your nose catches a scent so delicate you think it might be imagined. Something green, something faintly sweet. You follow it, slowly, and find Brother Odor, crouched beside the kitchen garden, his hands brushing frost from a small basket of foraged finds. Nothing cultivated. Of course, this is Iceland. The soil is half rock and half wishful thinking, but the hedgerows, rocky slopes, and forest edges hide things, if you know where to look, and Brother Odor knows. In his basket, he spot a few wild herbs, some soft moss, what might be birch bark shavings, and most glorious of all, a small lump of golden honey sealed in wax. You blink. Honey. It's rare enough in Iceland that most monks have only tasted it once, maybe twice. You know, it doesn't come from your own hives. You don't have any. It was likely gifted by a traveler, or brought by boat from Europe, wrapped in cloth, and traded for fish, wool, or a prayer. However, it got here. It's here now. And that means today's breakfast might taste like sunlight. When Brother Order passes by, you nod to him silently. He doesn't smile, but there's a glint in his eyes that says, wait until you taste it. Back in the kitchen, the porridge is already bubbling, and today it carries a different smell, still oats, but with something softer, herbal, almost floral. Hand again, no doubt. He's added something to the water. Maybe lichen, or nettles, or the crushed leaves Order just brought in. You sit, and the bowl is placed in front of you. Same shape, same color, but the scent is different. You stir it once with your spoon, and catch threads of green, like a meadow hiding under the oats. You take your first bite, still hot, still thick, but this time, there's a faint bitterness, sharp, earthy, and calming, like the edge of tea made from birch bark. The flavor isn't strong. It barely registers, unless you pay attention, because here, breakfast is the only performance in town, and today, it's trying something new. You reach into your robe pocket for your crust of yesterday's bread, now dry enough to play music on. You crack it in half and dip it carefully. The porridge softens it, and you take a slow bite. Still rough, still chewy, but that little whisper of herb transforms it. It feels like you're eating outside, by a stream, in summer. Historians still argue whether these breakfast herbs had medicinal purposes or were simply the only seasoning available. Some records suggest monks used nettles to ward off fatigue, or steeped lichen to fight joint pain in the cold. Others claim they just wanted flavor without sin. You'd prefer the latter. You chew slowly and glance across the table just as brother walks by, balancing a very small plate. On it is the honey. It shines like amber in the morning light, thick, dark, almost sacred. He doesn't serve it to everyone, just the elders, the sick, a novice who's earned favor. He places a single drop, no larger than your thumbprint, on the side of your bowl. No words, just a nod. You stare at it for a moment, admiring the way it clings to the wood, stubborn and golden. Then, reverently, you touch your spoon to it. One taste. It's not like sugar. It's deeper, more complex. It coats your mouth like velvet and tastes faintly of flowers you've never seen. You close your eyes and chew your bread slowly, using the last edge to scoop the remaining smear. You're not supposed to worship food, but this is divine. The warmth from the porridge, the sharpness of the herbs, the silk of the honey. It's the kind of harmony you only get once in a season, maybe in a year. Around you, the other monks eat with the same deliberate calm. No one speaks, but every eye moves just a little slower, every bite a little more mindful. You wonder if this will be one of the mornings you write about in your journal. Just a line or two, nothing poetic. Something like, breakfast. Honey, I live today. The bowls begin to empty. The honey disappears. The moment fades, but the warmth in your chest stays, slowly working its way to your fingers. Brother collects the bowls, humming again. The tune is familiar. Now something wordless, soft, a melody only he remembers. You watch the fire dim, the herbs settle, the steam rise in slower curls. The abbot rises, signaling the end of breakfast. You stand too, tucking the memory of that sweetness somewhere deep, like a prayer you won't say aloud. Outside, the sun has begun to burn off the mist. It isn't warm, not yet, but it's trying, and for today, that's enough. It's not discussed openly, but every monk knows. There is a faint buzz in your belly on the days the mead appears. It's not strong mead, of course, not enough to cause a stumble, but just enough to warm your chest and make the prayers feel like lullabies. Technically, alcohol in the morning is discouraged, unless it's medicinal, or festive, or part of a gift from visiting clergy, all of which are, conveniently, recurring events. You return from early labor hauling driftwood to the storeroom, helping brother secure a roof tile half loosened by the wind, and, as you step into the refectory, your nose catches it. A different kind of warmth. Sweet, fermented, slightly sour, mead. The modest kind brewed from barley or honey. Barely alcoholic, often cloudy, and always served in moderation. In Icelandic monasteries, mead was a practical indulgence, easier to keep than wine, and less likely to attract disapproval if you drank it without singing afterward. Historians still debate how widespread monastic brewing was in Iceland compared to mainland Europe. Some say brewing was routine. Others argue that it was a luxury practiced only in monasteries with agricultural reach. All you know is this. Brother has a secret barrel in the corner behind the and when he drags it out, good things happen. Today, the monks are served small wooden cups, barely 3 sips, worth each, filled with a cloudy amber liquid that smells of old fruit and damp stone. You hold it carefully, reverently. This is not a drink. It's a privilege. You glance around before taking your first sip. It's sharp at first, then soft, like the memory of a raisin. It tingles slightly at the back of your throat. The sweetness is faint, overpowered by the earthiness of whatever grain it was brewed from. There's a whisper of bitter and, oddly, peace. You exhale slowly, feeling the warmth trail down into your chest. Not enough to intoxicate, of course, not but enough to make your spine relax and your jaw unclench for the first time all week. A light mead like this isn't brewed for celebration. It's brewed for insulation, for survival, for giving the body a tiny, sleepy exhale in the midst of relentless cold. You sip again, slower now. Around the room, you notice the smallest shift in posture, shoulders loosening, hands unclasping, even the abbot's lips relaxing ever so slightly at the corners. It's as if every monk collectively decided, without a word, to pretend today is just a little softer. You dip the edge of your bread crust into the cup, letting it soak. It turns sweet and soggy, a humble cake. You chew it slowly, eyes half closed, imagining summer wind and bees you'll never see. Once, Brother Stiganda tried to brew a stronger batch in secret, added too much honey, let it sit too long. It turned into something more dangerous, thick, cloying, potent. The novice who drank it wandered into the goat pen and tried to convert it. After that, the abbot declared a strict rule. No strong meat unless someone's dying, and even then, maybe, you remember the story fondly. The goat remembers it less so. You take your final sip. The cup is empty too soon. You wish you could savor more, but that would be asking too much. And besides, there is no such thing as seconds when the meat is served. Not in this abbey. Not unless you're the abbot. You rinse your cup at the stone basin beside the refectory, watching the last golden drop spiral away like a sunbeam in water. A small part of you whispers, that was enough. And it was. More would be dangerous. Too much comfort clouds the mind. That's the official stance. Anyway, but you think there's room for softness and faith? Room for warmth? Even if it comes in the shape of 3 spoonfuls of fermented barley and a bite of damp crust. You return to your seat, letting the last of the mead settle into your bloodstream like a lullaby. The chants that follow feel slower, gentler. You hum them with less effort. Your fingers stop twitching. Your breath deepens. Around you, the monastery feels less like a fortress and more like a cocoon. The wind outside quiets. Or maybe you've just stopped noticing it. You tilt your head back slightly, letting the fire's warmth hit your throat, and imagine you're somewhere else. Not far, just outside, in the grass, in the sun, holding a cup of something sweet. There is a myth among the older monks that mead opens the spirit. Is that it helps you hear things you were usually too busy to notice. The breath of God, the voice of nature, the sound of your own heartbeat. You're not sure if that's true, but right now, everything feels softer. You feel softer. And for a brief, fleeting moment, you're not hungry, not cold, not tired. You're just still. The bell rings again, low and slow. You stand, shoulders relaxed, and shuffle back into the rhythm of the day. The mead's warmth lingers, faint but real, like the last line of a song you can't quite remember. The warmth from the mead is fading now, gently replaced by the usual mid-morning ache. You've returned from the gardens, where your fingers sifted through frozen soil in search of nothing in particular. That kind of labor is more about obedience than outcome. The body needs motion, the mind needs focus, and the rule of silence needs something to keep it from driving you quietly mad. But now that you're back in the chapel, kneeling once more on the hard-worn stone, you're very aware of your stomach again. It growls not loudly, but with the kind of low, persistent sound that makes your ribs feel hollow. You bow your head a little lower and try not to think about it. The thing is, meals in this monastery, especially breakfast, aren't meant to satisfy. They're meant to temper, to remind you of your earthly limits. The rule of St. Benedict, though written far to the south in warmer, richer lands, looms over everything here. Fasting is virtue. Hunger is humility. A full stomach, a suspicious luxury. Historians still argue whether Icelandic monks adhered to the rule strictly or adapted it for survival. The texts suggest both. In this climate, where storms could last for days and fish refused to bite for weeks, some abbeys relaxed the fasting rules not out of defiance, but necessity. Still, even leniency had its limits, and right now, you're beyond them. Your body leans forward a little too far during the next chant, and you have to steady yourself. The dizziness comes in waves. First, it's just the sway of breath and light, then a creeping sense of detachment from your limbs. You focus on the wall in front of you, a small crack in the stone shaped like a bird. As you've stared at it many times. Today, it seems to pulse slightly. You're not panicking. Not quite. But you're aware. You're very aware of how little you've eaten. Your morning porridge, though warm and earnest, burned off hours ago. The crust of bread, even with honey, might as well have been ash for all the energy it offered. And the mead, a memory, one that now feels like a cruel joke. You shift your knees slowly, subtly. The cold of the floor presses into your joints. You breathe deeper, willing your blood to keep moving. And then you remember, it's not just you. Years ago, brother fainted. Mid him, face pale, lips blue, dropped like a sack of grain. No warning, no drama, just silence, then collapse. The abbey physician really, just Brother Snorri with a good herb collection. But everyone knew. Fast in, that week, the abbot allowed second portions for a full day and a half. Then everything went back to normal. You blink slowly, anchoring your focus back to the present. The chanting continues, steady and eternal, like waves on a stone shore. But your mind drifts again. You imagine something: wild-boiled eggs. Not soft, not seasoned. Just eggs. Warm, solid, heavy in the hand. It's a ridiculous thought. You haven't seen an egg in months. The chickens were traded away last year for a shipment of candles and wool thread. You heard rumors that one had been secretly kept behind the smokehouse, laying eggs under the woodpile. But that ended after a novice tried to fry one with a magnifying glass. You smirk at the memory. Even hungry, your brain finds humor in strange places. You straighten up, whispering a silent apology to your body. There's no more food coming not into the evening meal, and that one might be thinner than breakfast. You'll drink water, you'll chew your prayers, and you'll hold yourself upright because that's what monks do. Brother Kettle is swaying a little too now. His face is pale, eyes You glance at him briefly, offering the quietest nod of solidarity. No words, but he sees it, and he nods back. You both resume your chanting, lips moving through the syllables like dancers too tired to lift their feet. And yet, you carry on. The bell rings again, ending the session. You rise slowly, carefully, as if your bones have turned to wax. The walk back to the cloister feels longer than it should. Your robe is too heavy, the wind is too loud, but still, you move. This is what the rule demands. Endurance, through discomfort, grace through hunger. It's not glamorous, it's not even heroic, it just is. You pause in the hallway to catch your breath. The stone wall is cool against your palm. You wonder, for a moment, how many monks have stood here just like this, wondering if they'd make it to supper. Probably all of them. Probably more than once. Outside, the sheep bleat. The sky has shifted to a dull silver. Noon approaches. You're still standing. And tomorrow, you'll do this all over again. You don't hear Brother Kuming. He moves like steam, slow and silent, but you smell him. More accurately, you smelled the kitchen. Sour milk, wet wood, and something sharp you can't place. He's carrying a basket tucked under one arm, and though he says nothing, you already know this is one of his experiments. You've seen them before. Sometimes they're small triumphs porridge with actual body, a crumb of cheese that doesn't squeak. Other times, they're curious, like the time he added powdered seaweed to stretch a dwindling grain supply, and the entire refectory smelled like low tide for 2 days. Still, is respected, revered, even in a place where every bowl of food is a prayer, disguised as survival. The kitchen monk is the closest thing to a wizard. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, people listen. And when he cooks, people eat. Today's basket holds strange shapes. Moss green, stringy, and rehydrated with milk. A cloth-wrapped lump that turns out to be curds. And a jug of whey water. Whey water is S most divisive ingredient. It's the runoff from cheese making. Tangy and slightly translucent. And he uses it to stretch soups, soften bread, or, on bold days, mix into porridge. It tastes like regret soaked in dairy, but it fills you. And sometimes, that's enough. He sets down the basket and begins working, humming that low, tuneless melody again. He adds moss to the pot, plucks it apart by hand, and stirs it into a thin gruel that smells earthy and damp. You've had moss before. It's fibrous, chewy, but high in something maybe, not flavor, but texture. It makes food feel fuller. Claimed once that the right moss could keep a man alive for days. No one asked him to test it. As he works, you watch the transformation. The curds are crumbled. The whey is warmed. The moss thickens. He adds a pinch of salt, always salt. His one indulgence, and a crushed leaf of some herb you can't name. You sit nearby, back against the wall, letting the warmth of the fire reach your knees. The scent changes. Less sour now. More herbal. Almost soothing. You remember last winter, when added lichen to a stew and half the monks thought they were being poisoned. Turns out, it was just bitter, and they were just tired. Historians still argue whether such additions, moss, lichen, bark, were born out of creativity or desperation. In truth, it's both. Icelandic monastic cuisine wasn't about flavor. It was about You're handed a bowl, and inside is the moss. It's a pale greenish gray, studded with bits of curd and tiny floating leaves. You stir it once. It smells like damp earth and milk. You take a bite. It's better than expected. The moss gives it body. The curd softens the bitterness, and the herbs, whatever they are, linger on your tongue like a distant summer. The whey tang stings your throat just a little, but it wakes you up. You eat slowly, carefully. The spoon feels heavier than usual. Around you, the other monks do the same, slurping in silence, heads bowed. Some pause between bites. Others scrape the bowl before they're halfway through. No one wastes. You glance toward. He's watching not out of pride, but calculation, measuring reactions, weighing improvement. You give him a subtle nod, the kind that says, "This was good, this helped." He nods back, wordless, and turns to stoke the fire. You finish the bowl. The moss has settled at the bottom, a little tougher there, but edible. You chew each bite, like it matters. And maybe it does. Maybe this strange, stretchy breakfast is what keeps your legs under you through the coldest prayers. You rise, place your bowl gently beside the hearth, and stretch your arms beneath your robe. The meal is done, and your belly is not full, but it is calm. That's the better word for it. Calm, settled. You leave the kitchen, and outside the wind has shifted. The air smells of salt and stone, and somewhere, sheep bleat in a far pen. You'd think of as Hansgard, quiet, always moving. You think of the moss, soaked in, stirred into something nourishing. You think of the curds that squeak and the way that lingers. And you think, maybe this life is less about flavor and more about effort, about taking what grows between rocks and turning it into warmth. You walk slowly through the cloister, the gruel heavy in your belly, the wind brushing your face like a hand from the past. The stones beneath your feet are cold, cracked, and steady, just like you. Winter never knocks in. Iceland bursts in like an uninvited guest and dares you to say something. The monastery feels smaller when the snow comes. The walls thicker but not always warmer, and the food even simpler. You wake in your cell one morning and the frost has crept onto the inside of the window, tracing delicate patterns like some bored saint decided to practice calligraphy with ice. You breathe, and the air fogs in front of you. The cold bites your fingertips as you fumble for your robe. This is the kind of morning where breakfast is more ritual than reward. There's no porridge today. No bread either. You knew it yesterday, when the grain beans were rattled and came up light. Brother said nothing, but the way he stared into the empty scoop spoke volumes. This morning, what awaits you is broth. Not soup, not stew. Broth. Hot water with things whispered into it. It's faintly yellow, smells of onion peel and distant fish bones. And if you squint, you might believe there's a carrot ghost floating in the middle. You'll wrap your hands around the warm bowl, grateful for the heat, if not the contents. One sip. Salty, slightly oily, vague hints of everything and nothing at once. You close your eyes and swallow. It's not satisfying. It's not even memorable, but it's enough to hold off the ache in your stomach for now. Historians still argue whether such broth-only breakfasts were standard in Icelandic monasteries or simply emergency measures. Records are sparse, often poetic, often cryptic. One 13th century entry refers to the water of marrow as a kindness in the lean days. Whether that meant actual marrow bones or just hopeful poetry, no one knows for sure. You sip again. The warmth slides down your throat like liquid discipline. Across the room, the other monks do the same. The silence feels heavier in winter. Even the clink of spoons sounds reluctant. You glance toward the hearth, but there's no fire, only gray coals. Fuel is short. The last driftwood shipment was delayed, and the garden hasn't yielded anything useful in weeks. The sheep are thin. You are thinner, but no one complains. That, perhaps, is the greatest miracle of monastic life. The suffering is shared so evenly, it becomes invisible. You place your bowl down slowly and stare into what's left, just broth residue, a few floating flecks of something green, maybe sage, maybe wishful thinking. You eat the last sip. Yes, eat. It's thick enough in spots to count as chewing. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve and exhale through your nose. No one speaks. No one even looks up. Everyone's conserving energy. Even glances feel like indulgence. You remember one winter years ago, when Brother Ordor recited a verse during breakfast. On something about trees and patience. He got kitchen duty for 2 weeks for speaking without permission, but no one forgot that line. You still don't know if he meant it as rebellion or hope. Either way, it felt like sunlight. You rise from your seat. The bowl clinks on the table as you set it down. Lighter than usual. The broth lingers in your belly like a memory. It's not filling, but it's something. Outside, the snow is blowing sideways, slicing through the cloister with tiny knives of ice. You clutch your robe tighter and keep your head down. You pass Brother Snorri in the hallway, his eyes sunken, but still burning with that quiet humor he never admits to. He gives you a subtle shrug as if to say, well, at least it was warm. You smirk. Barely, your breath curls out in front of you and disappears like a secret. In the stables, one of the sheep bleats, once half-heartedly. You wonder if it's hungry too. Probably. Everyone is. This is what winter does. It pairs everything. You become your bones and breath and whatever broth you can hold. You make do. You endure. The day stretches ahead like a snow-covered path. Chores. Prayers. More chores. More prayers. No promise of lunch. Maybe a small bit of salted curd if the kitchen has anything left. More likely, just water and warmth, if you're lucky. You think of the broth again, of the way it clung to the inside of the bowl, refusing to evaporate. That's you, really. Clinging, staying, being warm for as long as you can before the cold scrapes you clean again. And tomorrow, the broth may return. Or maybe just water. Either way, you'll be here, bowl in hand, breath fogging the air, heart beating like a drum made from patience. Some mornings, the world sneaks, something rare into your bowl, not from Iceland itself, but from across the sea. And when it happens quietly, without fanfare. Today is one of those mornings. You don't notice it at first. You shuffle into the refectory like always, tugging your robe around your shoulders, still half asleep. The fire is already going low, soft, contented, and the usual bowls sit stacked on the table. You expect pork, maybe broth, but then the scent hits you. Sweet, spiced, foreign. You blink and follow your nose, eyebrows rising just slightly. Sitting near the end of the long wooden bench is a tray bearing something impossible. Figs, dried, dark, sticky figs, wrinkled and delicate like old stories. And beside them, almonds, not a lot. Just a handful, maybe two, maybe less. But they're real almonds. You reach without thinking and stop yourself just in time. This isn't a gift. It's a display, a signal. These are for the guests. Or maybe the abbot. Or maybe the guest is the abbot today. You watch as the offerings are collected and carried to the high table. A visiting clergyman, maybe. Or a noble patron stopping by on his way to somewhere less remote. Whoever it is, they've brought gifts. Pepper, figs, almonds, possibly even wine. Though you don't see any. You're not disappointed. You've learned not to be. But something inside you stirs. You sit down with your bowloads again, but with a slightly richer sheen today. Maybe thanks to a dab of imported oil, or the milk left over from yesterday's curdling. You take a slow bite. Warm, heavy, slightly sweeter than usual. Maybe some of the fig syrup found its way into the pot. Unlikely, but you can dream. Historians still puzzle over how often Icelandic monasteries received imported goods. Shipping routes were few, ships small, in the sea famously unwilling. But records mention saffron, pepper, even cloves arriving in small amounts. Usually from mainland Europe or Norse trade lines. Often, these treasures were kept locked away, portioned out during feast days, or used medicinally. But today, the kitchen seems generous. You finish your porridge slowly, chewing each bite with practiced reverence. Around you, the monks do the same. Some glance toward the high table more often than usual. It's not envy, not quite. More like curiosity, a desire to remember what sweetness tastes like. Brother appears with a small wooden bowl, passed hand to hand until it reaches your end of the bench. Inside are exactly 5 almonds. 5. For the whole row. You look at them the way one might look at jewels. They're pale, firm, dry. You touch one gently and pass the bowl along, taking your portion. 1 almond, it's more than enough. You press it between your teeth and bite slowly. It resists at first, then breaks. The flavor blooms nutty, smooth, faintly creamy. You chew slowly. An almond lasts longer when you let it. Around you, the room feels quieter than usual, as if the sweetness brought reverence with it. No one looks excited, but everyone looks awake. You think about the fig syrup again, about whether scraped the last of it from the jar and added it to the pot for flavor. If he did, it's an act of mercy. If not, the warmth is just in your head. Either way, it worked. You notice Brother Stigender, watching the abbot with a blank expression. The abbot tastes a fig, nods slightly, and then resumes eating his more modest fare. Even he doesn't indulge too much, not in front of the rest. You wonder where the figs came from. Southern Europe, most likely. Or traded from a merchant sailing between Bergen and Dublin. Maybe even a gift from a fellow abbot, some quiet form of monastic diplomacy. Here, we have figs. You have fish. Let's share the kingdom of God, 1 raisin at a time. You finish the last spoonful of porridge, swallow the memory of the almond, and feel something different in your chest. Not satisfaction. Monastic meals rarely offer that, but clarity. You feel the texture of the almond lingering between your teeth, the way the sweetness sat on your tongue, the way your body responded like a bell struck gently in the cold. It's a soft awakening, a reminder that the world, even in its strictness, sometimes offers delight. And here's the strange part. You don't want more. 1 almond was enough. If you had 10, you'd forget them. If you had none, you'd only wonder. But one, you'll remember. You rise from the bench, bowl in hand, and pass it gently to the kitchen monk. He nods barely. He nods back. No words are exchanged, but you understand. This morning was special. Outside, the sky is lighter than usual. The clouds are thin, and the wind has lost its bite. You walk slowly through the cloister, hands tucked into your sleeves, replaying the bite of almond in your mind like a song with only one perfect note. You don't know when you'll taste it again. Probably not for months. Maybe not for years. But that's the beauty of it. The sweetness stays longer when it's rare. The guests have left. Their cloaks were thick, their boots clean, and their voices oddly loud in the stillness of the cloister. You watch them from the shadows, nods. Out of jealousy, but out of curiosity. They laughed during their meal. Laughed like food was joy, not function. Now the hall is empty again, and the quiet has settled like snow on every surface. But they've left traces, crumbs of white bread, the sharp scent of pepper clinging to the table, and a thin film of something sweet in the bottom of the guest bowl. You won't taste it, but you'll remember it. And tonight, you just might talk about it. Quietly, carefully, because monks aren't supposed to gossip, but they do. Always have. Always will. It happens in murmurs during chores, in glances exchanged over laundry lines, or in barely whispered remarks during wood gathering. And breakfast, though silent by rule, carries the weight of all the things left unsaid. You sit on your usual bench with the morning bowl standard oats. Thin and gray. No surprise there. But what's surprising is, brother. He sets his bowl down beside yours and slides a crumb across the table with the tip of his spoon. It's pale, soft, unlike anything baked in your kitchen guest bread. He shrugs a tiny lift of one shoulder and turns back to his food as if nothing happened. You stare at the crumb. It's no bigger than your fingernail. You consider what to do. If you eat it, that's indulgence. If you don't, that's waste. If you share it, that's kindness. You break it in half and pass a piece to Brother Katil, who's already pretending not to look. He accepts it with a nod that might be gratitude, or just cold acknowledgement. You all take a bite. Soft, buttery, fleeting, and that's when the murmuring starts. Not out loud, of course, but behind the eyes, under the breath. A dozen monks quietly thinking the same things. Did you see the abbot smiling? I think the guest had pepper on his eggs. Where did that fig come from? Did Savenio? These whispers travel silently, like incense through the halls. You'd be amazed how much gets communicated without a word. Once, a novice from the south tried to engage in open conversation during breakfast. Asked, out loud, what the dried herbs in his bowl were. The silence that followed could have split granite. He didn't speak again for 6 months. Lesson learned. But among the seasoned monks, communication finds other ways. A glance, a gesture, a shared smirk, a lifted spoon. You eat your oats slowly. They're watery today, but warm. And honestly, you don't mind. The guest meal was a spectacle, but this is the rhythm. The bread may have been softer, but it came with noise, distraction, discomfort. You prefer this, even if you grumble in your soul now and then. Still, the presence of guests does something strange. It opens the abbey, if not physically, then mentally. It breaks routine. And in a place like this, routine is religion. So a shift, even small, feels like a theological earthquake. Brother Snorri walks in late, sits down with a bowl, and taps twice on the table with his knuckle. Once, that used to mean salt. Now it just means I heard everything. You tap once in return. So did I. It's not defiance. It's culture. The monastery isn't sterile. It's alive, breathing through shared hunger, shared silence, and shared crumbs. You remember a time 2 winters ago when a guest brought an orange. A real orange. The abbot sliced it into quarters and passed it around. Most monks had never tasted citrus. You licked the inside of their peel for a week afterward. And yes, people still talk about it quietly, like a parable, like a legend. This morning's gossip, by comparison, is tame. The guest bowed to the cook. The guest left half a fig. The guest said Iceland was beautiful. Obvious lies, but we take what we can get. You finish your bowl, rinse it as always, and linger by the hearth. The fire's still burning from the guest meal higher than usual, as if showing off. You stretch your fingers toward it, letting the heat bite the cold from your skin. Then you look down and notice something tucked behind the kettle. A single almond, missed, forgotten, or spared. You glance around. No one's watching. You reach down, pick it up, brush off a speck of ash, and turn it over in your palm. You should hand it to the abbot, or place it back in the pantry. But instead, you slip it into your robe pocket. Not for now. For later. For the walk back to your cell. When the silence is long, and the wind is louder than your thoughts. That's when it will matter. Not because it's sweet, but because it's shared. Because it carries the echo of laughter you didn't join. And the taste of a story you can still tell quietly. Over chores. In glances. In the space between spoons. Sometimes, despite the strictness of the rule and the heavy air of discipline that hangs in the halls like incense smoke, things shift. Slowly. Quietly. Without permission. It happens not in rebellion, but in exhaustion. And on mornings like this, when the wind howls so hard against the stone that the chapel windows rattle, and the breath of every monk clouds like mist in the refectory, the rules bend not in words, but in choices. You sit at the end of the bench, watching Brother ladle porridge, with a speed that borders on impatience. He just serves. The fire crackles louder today, as if trying to distract from the sound of monks breathing heavily through their noses half-sick. It's the kind of morning where fasting turns from piety to cruelty, and even the abbot seems to know it. He doesn't speak when he enters, doesn't raise his hand. He just takes his bowl and sits down. The silence this time is different. It's heavy, not reverend, just tired. You begin to eat. The porridge is thinner than usual, less salt, more water, and it's piping hot, maybe on purpose. As if he's trying to scald the hunger out of you. You don't mind, you slurp it fast, so do the others. No one's pretending anymore. It's not ceremony, it's survival. Historians still argue whether rural Icelandic monasteries followed Benedictine fasting rules to the letter, or modified them to fit the climate. Some argue that obedience to tradition gave monks a sense of control in a wild, unforgiving land. Others say the land won every time, and the rules were more flexible than recorded. Looking around now, you think you know the answer. This isn't disobedience. It's adaptation. Last night, the snow drifted so high the latrine door froze shut. You watched Brother Kettle hack through the drift with a shovel made from a broken yoke. This morning, half the firewood was damped. The goats refused to leave the shed, and one of the novices started coughing again, dry and sharp, like brittle parchment. So yes, this breakfast isn't up to code. It's too fast, too messy, too loud. But it's what the day requires. You finish your porridge in a few minutes, leaving nothing but a ring of steam in your bowl. The crust of bread, when it comes, is softer today. Someone left it in the hearth's warmest corner overnight. You tear off a piece and chew slowly. The center is warm, not just room temperature warm. A rare comfort, a deliberate kindness. You glance at Brother and see the faintest grin at the corner of his mouth. Blink, and you'd miss it. But it's there. He knows what he did. You nod once. No smile, just gratitude. The others eat quickly, not for joy, but necessity. You hear a muffled cough 2 seats away. Another monk shivers hard enough that his spoon rattles in the bowl. The wind outside sounds like a ghost dragging its coat over the roof. And still, you eat. Still, you endure. Today, there's no second serving. No butter, no honey, no figs, no almonds, no guests. Just heat, just food. Just the quiet understanding among the monks that today's rules don't come from the abbot. They come from the weather, from the hunger that tightens your chest, from the look in Brother's eyes when he hands you the ladle. You realize he skipped his own portion, gave it away. You'd glance at his bologna water. He sips it like broth and closes his eyes, and you pretend not to notice, because that's what he wants. You tuck the rest of your crust into your sleeve for later. Maybe he'll find it. Maybe you'll leave it by his tools. No one has to know. The silence continues, but it's filled with meaning. This is when monastic life becomes something else, not about obedience, not about purity, about presence, care, stillness in the face of collapse. You stand slowly. Your knees crack. Your spine protests, but you're full enough to carry on. That's all that matters. Outside, the snow hasn't stopped, but the sun has clawed through a gap in the clouds, casting one weak beam across the floor. You step into it, just for a moment, and close your eyes. Your face warms, just barely, but it's enough to remember that not every rule was written in stone. Some were written in steam, and warmth, and the soft crust of bread left by a hearth overnight. And this morning, that's all the permission you need. The bell doesn't ring this morning. Not at first. Instead, you wake to the sound of wind slapping against the monastery like a wet cloth. The stone walls moan. Somewhere in the rafters, something shifts, maybe a bird, maybe snow, maybe the roof itself settling deeper into winter. You pull your robe tighter before even sitting up. Cold seeps in from the floor, the walls, even the ceiling. It's everywhere. You hesitate. For a moment, you wonder, will there even be breakfast today? You shuffle into the refectory later than usual, not by much, just a few breaths. But it's quiet, not monkish, empty. Brother stands alone at the hearth, his hands resting on the edge of the kettle, eyes half closed like he's praying or listening to something only he can hear. You move slowly to your bench, sit down, and wait. The fire crackles lazily. The scent is familiar, old roots, maybe a touch of barley, comforting in a way. He finally moves. One by one, he serves. There's no ceremony, no chant, no blessing from the abbot, just the dull clatter of wooden bowls on wood tables. And when yours is placed in front of you, it takes a moment before you even reach for the spoon. The contents aren't remarkable, some broth, thin and speckled with herbs. But today it feels like more. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's the simplicity, maybe it's the fact that after a week of wind, snow, skipped meals, and frayed tempers, you're simply glad to hold something warm. You sip. It tastes of thyme and ash, faint sweetness from boiled onions, a hint of salt. Nothing luxurious, but balanced, gentle. This isn't a meal, it's an exhale. You lean forward and wrap both hands around the bowl. Let the heat spread into your fingers, your wrists, your chest. Around the room, others do the same. No one rushes, no one speaks. It's as if the abbey itself needed a moment of collective stillness. The kitchen monk doesn't sit. He moves quietly around the room, adjusting logs, watching faces, pouring water. He pauses behind Brother Snorri, who's barely touched his spoon, and gently places a second scoop in his bowl. No one protests. The old monk's eyes flutter with something between gratitude and memory. This is how it happens. Sometimes not through structure, but through softness. The routine breaks. The rhythm slows, and what replaces it is deeper. Something older than the rule. Something human. You sip again and let your eyes close. For a moment, the refectory fades. The wind outside softens. The cold at your feet no longer matters. All that exists is the warmth in your hands and the breath in your chest. You could stay here forever. Just like this. The sun pushes weakly through a cloud slit, lighting the stone wall in a pale golden beam. Dust dances in the light. Tiny, aimless, perfect. You take another spoonful and feel it settle. Not just in your body, but deeper. Into whatever part of you spent years in quiet hunger. Not for food, necessarily, but for gentleness, understanding, and somehow, here, in a bowl of thin broth on a silent morning, you find it. You glance down the table. Brother Kettle is crying. Not loudly. Not with sound. Just one tear slipping down a cheek as he swallows. He doesn't wipe it away. No one stares. It's too sacred for that. The moment continues. You finish the last spoonful, holding it on your tongue like a prayer. You place the bowl down. Gently, no clatter. No scrape. Just soft wood. On soft wood, the room exhales with you. The abbot enters then, silent as the light. He walks past every bowl, every monk, placing one hand briefly on each shoulder as he says nothing. He doesn't need to. His touch is the final blessing. You close your eyes and breathe. The moment has passed, but its warmth remains. So now, the fire fades. The bowls are empty. The spoons are still. You walk back through the cloister slowly, each step a little heavier, but not from burden, from calm. The cold doesn't sting as much. The silence no longer presses. It simply holds you, like a blanket tucked around the edges of a restless dream. The sky is cleared now just a little, pale blue peeking through torn clouds. Your breath still clouds the air, but it feels softer, like fog over a still pond. You return to your cell, the familiar shape of it greeting you like an old friend. The stone walls, the straw mattress, the worn robe hanging on the peg, everything exactly as it was. Yet something in you is quieter now. Steadier. You lie down slowly, pulling the blanket over your shoulders. The hay crackles beneath you, and outside, the wind has stilled. Just the faint cry of a gull. Just the hum of your breath. You think of the porridge, the moss, the almond. You think of the monks beside you chewing, chanting, fainting, sharing. You think of the warmth passed silently from bowl to bowl, hand to hand, and as your eyes begin to drift closed, You realize you're not hungry. Not anymore. Not in the way that gnaws. You're full in the quietest sense. A kind of fullness that doesn't come from food, but from enough. Enough to carry you through the dark. Enough to sleep. Enough to wake again tomorrow. Still breathing. Still here. Still whole. Sleep well. Monk, you've made it through the morning.